welcome back to an in-depth look into an exploration of telecommunications in the Falklands. In part 1, I looked into what developments have occurred and how services have progressed and developed over the last several years. In terms of the data limits and the potential of uncapped ones being introduced to the Falklands shore-run services in the Channel Islands, Guernsey, St Helena, Ascension Island, and you did say one more, but I can't remember what it was.
Diego Garcia.
There you go. Are these capped as well? And if not, what makes the Falklands different from a business or a geographical point of view?
So the key difference is the islands that have a fibre optic cable supplying them, a subsea fibre optic cable. So if you take Guernsey as an example, Guernsey has a connection from the UK that goes on to France. So we're actually connected by fibre to the UK and to France. And there in Guernsey, if you sign up to our services, it's all uncapped. St Helena, we have recently switched to uncapped because we've now connected to the subsea cable that supplies St Helena. Whereas Ascension and the Falkland Islands are capped because we have effectively a limited resource that is supplied rather than through a fibre optic cable coming to the islands. We have through the air and satellite, and that's a much more costly way of delivering the same bandwidth. So it's limited, but as I say, I'm hopeful that we can go to unlimited as that capacity greatly increases. I see a path to that in terms of, again, using all of that capacity that is up there. We now have 2 suppliers. That gives us more leverage. We have the low latency aspect to that, which will mean speeds can improve as well. I'm a believer that things are improving at such a rate that the idea of having uncapped packages is starting to become into view, yes.
The services offered by Shore have seen improvement. Data packages have increased, with more expected this year. The installation of 4G towers has seen a dramatic increase in mobile coverage for camp residents, but have these improvements been enough? Many of the problems that were listed in the Cartesian report are still issues that the local community wish to see change. And many feel that these complaints are falling on deaf ears. Speaking to one local resident, they said that they feel it is frustrating that we cannot get what is out there, and that there would be less complaints about the current service if they were more open. People are fed up with complaining and don't see the point anymore.
I mean, this is a message to everyone here. If you are having problems, you're not getting the service that you're signed up to and that you've been given, please do call us. Please get in touch. Don't give up. Please get back in touch with us and let us look at it. And you know, as I said, we've got a team of 30 professionals here that are on hand, ready to look at and help you. So please get in touch.
It's felt that people are spending a lot and not getting much back. How would you respond to that?
I think I would argue that to agree. I think certainly costs are higher than we compared with the UK. But if you look at the actual cost per megabyte, the effective cost of the service, it's come down massively year on year with the changes we've made. In 2022 we increased the quotas by 50%. Increased speeds with no real change to pricing. And if you look at back, even 5 years, what we were, the volume that was included, or for that value, was significantly lower. So whilst the prices have remained fairly stable, the actual included value of that and the unit cost has dropped massively. And I'm sure that will continue to do so.
In a meeting of the Technology Development Group on the 19th of April 2023, it was highlighted by Director of Development and Commercial Services Becky Clark that the impact of limited mobile and broadband services may impact growth of certain types of tourism, such as walking or hiking, due to the coverage not being island-wide. In the same meeting, Lee Summers noted that on the Business Climate Survey, 2 or 3 barriers towards business growth mentioned the issue of the resilient speed of data. So, 1 year on, is this still the case? One representative from the tourism industry said that the current internet setup is most definitely a barrier to business growth. There is a plethora of travel software available which streamlines all the necessary information and documents production streams. But this is all underpinned by the need for constant, reliable iCloud access. We in the Falkland Islands are so far behind our counterparts globally. Moreover, when you consider the cost of a trip for an international visitor, we should be providing clients with what is expected: an efficient, well-documented service.
So at the moment, there's a number of industries that have identified to government that they are feeling that their business opportunities are limited. So some obvious ones are things like the availability of cloud-based services that require real low latency. That is an issue that Shaw is addressing in partnership with the government through the introduction of the low Earth orbit technology OneWeb system, which will be coming online later into February. That's obviously being done in a small way to start off with. It's very much a test of the facilities in this location. But there is space and capacity at the Shaw site for further expansion of that to be able to provide low latency. The government has worked with Shaw to identify, or to ask Shaw to identify, those customers who are likely to benefit the most from those low latency services. So that might be a big company that's working on a cloud-based online payroll system, for example. But equally, it can apply to individuals who do a lot of online gaming. This is also affecting government services, so some of the more recent data-based services that we might want to do, such as the electronic patient record system, which was recently out for public tender, so people may have seen. Most of the responses to that would predicate on a cloud-based system. So we really are looking at how that capacity can be provided for within the current licence period.
I think, connectivity for the Falklands is one of the levers that government has for economic growth. So the better internet connectivity is, the better the chances of us seeing economic growth. The same with flights, the same with shipping, etc. So I think anything like that affects the Falklands, so we need to have the best provision of services that we can possibly devise.
In terms of other industries, there's the sort of future-proofing element and the desire to expand, which might be able to happen if there was greater speeds, if there was greater amounts of data available. We have looked at those, so there's things like the Tourist Board, for example, who identified in their 2030 strategy that the lack of available islands-wide internet, mobile data and broadband hotspots was something that they felt would be a limit on future land-based tourism in particular. And that's both from an enjoyment perspective of wanting to be able to go out and share photos, but it's also from a health and safety perspective of if you went on a walk and you were to suffer an injury, how do you get in touch with the emergency services? So those factors are being incorporated into the future planning, and obviously at the same time looking at what can be done within the systems that we have available at the moment.
Do you think, just off the top of my head, do you think that the limited internet and limited technology we have down here could be impacting the quality of contractors that come down there, that they might hear that the internet's not great?
It impacts the quality of contractors, it impacts the life of young people, it impacts the business that you're able to conduct down here, it impacts everybody on their day-to-day lives. That's how important it is.
Because I'm sure a lot of students, when they go away, they go back to the UK and they see
Yes.
this service that is provided over there, and it's probably
Yes.
on their mind before coming
Young
back.
people, I'm not a gamer, but if you're a gamer and you try and, you get one of these PS4s or whatever the PS, I think it is, and you download something, you use up your internet package in days, and it's very, very hungry for bandwidth. So I think all of those things impact the ability of the islands to attract people, the ability of the islands to retain people, to retain our young people, etc. So that's how important it is, yes.
I think previously the approach that was taken to me was a sensible approach for the time. They got a report that looked at the landscape, so it looked at the specific context now of the Falkland Islands, or now as it was back then, and it looked also at, you know, what are the available technologies, what is the direction of travel. So they did look at projecting and predicting, you know, how internet usage was growing, and did, you know, they could see that was, you know, that there was still a direction of travel there. I think we probably need to do something similar now, where we look at where we are now, look at the technologies that are out there, look at the things that, you know, we can predict, accepting that you're never going to predict, you know, things that you absolutely don't know are going to be invented, and you need to try and think about ways to sort of provide for that, so that we don't end up in difficult situations in the future. So I think that sort of process, we've already started to have some discussions around that, and again, our Director of Development and Commercial Services, Becky Clark, is leading and looking into that side of things as well. So I think, you know, we'll all be working together to try and look at that, and then start to take some decisions about where we might go in future.
Obviously, we need a system in place where the whole of the Falklands can have, I think, faster, cheaper internet with no package sizes. Now, that may take a little bit of thinking outside the box, because I know there's people who don't have, well, in fact, for example, if I can use Starlink, it would be more expensive for them, that setup, than what they're paying at the moment. So there will have to be some creative thinking done somewhere, but it will have to be a situation that we arrive at where the whole of our country is covered. I'm not going to support something that's just good, as I say, for the rich, or for Stanley forgetting the camp. So we do need telephones. Now, whether the landline has almost had its day, I'm not sure. But certainly mobile phone, and then there's things that run over the shore backbone as it exists now of their telecoms. I think there's some television, maybe, and radio and stuff like that. There's going to have to be thought about, how do we do that? But the world of telecoms is moving that quick now that I still think within 2 years we can probably find a viable solution.
I was going to say, we are rapidly approaching the 2027 end of the agreement. When is the time for action? When do we need to start thinking about how things are going to develop?
I think that's already the case, and to be honest, we have already started some of that work. But no, absolutely, you know, the next 12 months in particular is going to be absolutely critical to that sort of future position. And when we're then starting to talk about specific proposals for the future, no, I think absolutely we should try to take the community along with us, and make sure that people understand and hopefully agree with the choices that are made. One of the things that's been running for a little while now is a technology development group, and part of the purpose of that group was to get the different sectors of the economy to think a little bit about you know, what is their usage of communications technologies now, what do they think it will be in future, and so, you know, we've got a little bit of a picture about how people might expect things to move on. So, you know, we've talked to different sectors like the construction industry, the rural business sector, the fishing industry, and others, just to try and get that sort of view.
When asked for a comment on how they see the future of telecommunications in the islands, current CEO of Shaw South Atlantic Limited, Roma Stewart, stated, "I believe you have on record an interview with Alistair Beak, our Shaw Group CEO, which was done during his visit here last month. I believe this covers Shaw's future plans, packages, and reaffirms our commitment and continued investment in the islands." Alistair is correct in that we have a few things in the pipeline, as you know, with low latency, education websites, and new products which should be available soon. The recent visit by Shaw Group CEO Alistair Beak has been divisive between members of the community. MLA Gavin Shaw has been one member of the community who has been quite open about how he felt the visit went.
I really thought, given that where we are now with, well, especially the internet, with Starlink, other flavours are available, I believe, going overhead, and others are on the way, that Shaw would have actually stepped up to the mark and said, the world's changing, it's changing quickly, we have to change with it. And I was just so disappointed that from the conversation that we had with the gentleman, it just doesn't seem to be as if it was going to be the case, which annoyed me because I've always been very, very cautious, because last time when we signed up with Shaw, I could not have stood up and said to the community that there was a viable option other than Shaw for a whole island solution, which has got to be. We can't just have, if you like, the rich going off doing one thing, leaving the rest of us, and probably in a worse off state, or with people in camp not having telecoms that they require. But I think the world has now reached a point where probably you could say that the internet side is sorted. We're reaching a point, I believe, where within 18 months, 2 years, telecoms could change in the Falklands radically.
We had several meetings with Alistair whilst he was here, and it was a really good opportunity for certainly me to meet him and a few other key members of the staff who are going to be looking at what happens after the current exclusive licence, but also responsible for managing the current contract. From my perspective, it was positive to be able to speak with him in person, and there were several good things that have come out of it. So the most notable is the whitelisting of sites used for education purposes, which in liaison with our education department, we are going to be seeing Shaw make available without use of personal data. That is a really exciting development, and I think something that will respond to something the community's raised as a concern, particularly around children staying up late or not being able to do their homework. So that was positive, and I think that he'd clearly come here having familiarised himself with the context of the Falklands.
As I say, I was really disillusioned and disappointed by that meeting, and it really has brought me down off the fence, as it were, and I've stopped being perhaps as cautious as I used to be, and have basically run out of patience. If they're not going to step up to the mark, then I think we have to start looking elsewhere when the agreement comes to an end. But I mean, going back to Starlink, of course, something I have to say to your viewers is that to have a Starlink package, you have to apply to the regulator. It's not a free-for-all. You can't just import your own on a whim, set it up and say goodbye Shaw. It's not. We are in a contract situation, and there are terms under that contract which has to be complied with. So, the first 2 steps really is to contact Shaw to see if they can provide what you're looking for. Then perhaps if they can't, or you think they can't, then by all means contact the regulator. But you cannot go off and do your own thing, because you could find yourself on the wrong side of the law, and I would not encourage anyone, or indeed condone anybody doing that. The law, I'm afraid, is the law and has to be complied with.
In some ways, his visit was never going to satisfy everybody, but from a FIG perspective, there was a full and frank exchange of views and a commitment on both sides towards continuing the working relationship, because they are our provider, and being able to work positively with them is something we're really committed to.
There must be business and logistical reasons why a company such as Shaw might not necessarily be able to partner with a company like Starlink.
Yeah, so Starlink haven't traditionally worked with telecoms companies, and they sell direct to consumer, and they have no interest in talking to anyone else, actually. So that makes them a difficult company to work with. We have reached out to them in the past and they weren't interested in supplying the Falkland Islands. However, things are starting to change on that front as well. So when I talk about there being more capacity, Starlink may be part of the solution in the future as well, that we would utilise to provide everyone with improved services here. And because of that, that also creates competition, which is healthy. And so by talking to various suppliers, we have, as I said, two suppliers today. That's better than one. And potentially the alternatives give us more leverage and competition to help again the economics of everything and improve the end product that we deliver here in the Falklands for everyone.
I think we're seeing technological changes now. It always changes. The need for the internet increases exponentially, it seems, year on year. And trying to deliver that through the systems they've been doing is causing an issue. I think we're yet to see the LEO, the low Earth orbit satellite solution from shore themselves. I think they've admitted that there's been a delay to that service. It should have been coming live, I think, this month or maybe even last month. I think the Starlink side is all about the internet, really. So the worry I have is we focus solely on the internet and forget about all of the other services that are delivered across the Falkland Islands. And I'm not just talking about to camp, I'm talking about, in Stanley, MPA and everywhere else.
I think we hopefully, sure, you can see they've got the OneWeb project coming up. I hope they'll be putting something out to their customers fairly soon to say what extra things they can offer to their customers. If they can't, what was the point in spending all that money on that facility? So I think they need to be the ones that are showing us that they're innovative in the way they provide things to their customers. And I've made those same points directly to shore as well. They need to get on, and I still haven't seen any contact they've made with customers to say, hey, look, by the end of February we should have this up and running and we will be able to provide you these things. They need to be making that running. Any other business would be in a competitive environment. Unfortunately, they're not in a competitive environment, and I think that's what stops them from getting out there and going and talking with their customers.
How does Shaw feel about being called a monopoly and it being critiqued about, maybe taking people for granted in terms of costs and all that kind of stuff?
So we definitely don't take our position lightly, and the responsibility of providing services is huge. And I don't like the term monopoly because we don't operate like we're a monopoly provider. We don't think like that. Our purpose as a business is to connect our island communities for a better future. We operate in seven small island communities across the globe, with the Falklands all the way up to the Isle of Man and across to Diego Garcia. Islands that are varying sizes and all have their own individual set of circumstances and needs. And that's what we're here to do, is to connect the Falklands to a better future and the community of the Falklands. And we're working really, really hard to do that. And I believe that we've demonstrated over the last few years just how much the services can be improved. And I'm optimistic, as I've been saying, about how much more the services can be improved. If we were the worst type of monopoly provider, we wouldn't be improving services. They would just be flatlining and actually probably degrading in the worst cases of how monopolies can abuse their position. We don't work like that. We don't believe it. That's not the DNA of the company.
I can understand people's frustration very much, and I can also understand that things appear to have stood still. We're in the right place now, a few years before the end of the current licence and contract, to be able to intensify this work. So the public will start to see more. You'll see a tender going out for these consultants probably within the next sort of 6 weeks, and hopefully we'll get some good responses to that. You will see the tender pack for market engagement going live probably at the beginning of next year, and between those 2 points there'll be a degree of public engagement and ability to input into what that market engagement pack looks like. So there is a building up now. And that is a key piece of work. MLAs and FIG released information saying that telecoms was one of 2 top priorities. And that is something that certainly within development commercial services we're really excited to be leading on, but also aware of the vital nature of this work and how important it is to get this right from the start. So you need the right outcome, but you also need the right process to be able to demonstrate exactly what is and is not possible.
I think it's a relatively complex problem. It goes back to those sort of 3 areas I highlighted around the sort of the provision of service. So on the one hand, certainly some people would like to self-provide, but equally the operator's got a universal service obligation in our exclusive license, so we must provide. So you've got this sort of, they're almost at odds where you can't be expected to provide to everybody if someone can then self-provide. So I think that's a very complex. It'll be a challenge for everyone involved. I think, sure, as the operator, the government, the community, how you want to sort of look at how those services are delivered and to who and how. And also, there's an expectation of some legacy services that come at a cost that don't necessarily make very much money, but there's an expectation that someone still does those. So I don't have an answer what that will look like. And clearly, that very much sits with the government. They've made it clear. I think Mark in his letter today said that they're obviously going to be consulting everyone, which I would assume includes Shaw. What is very clear, Shaw is committed here for the long term. We've been here since, in one form or another, since the mid-1970s. We've got a local team here, so we're interested to operate, go beyond our current licence commitment. The company's invested for the long term. You can see that with the investments we've just made in satellite technology. That's not something you build for a limited period of time. It's something we've invested in with a view to sort of future enhancement. So I think it's going to be an interesting, challenging time for everybody, but I'm sure we're very much engaged with the government and the community to understand how we can sort of take that forward beyond the current licence period.
There is a tide of people saying we would go to Starlink if it wasn't for this charge every month. And, the tide's coming in like King Canute. They can sit there and wait for the tide to come up to their necks, or they can start moving and doing things. And that I would hope they would start doing things. I'd like to see a way of opening up the market to more competition. I think we need to be very careful in how we do that because of the universal service provider requirements. But I'd like to see us opening up the market where at all possible, because I think that's the only way we're going to see innovations within the islands.
What I want to see happen, and what I've asked for, is to get the some senior officers from within FIG together initially to understand exactly what different technologies we're talking about, and try and map out how we, the future and what we're going to do. So that's a bit of a longer term thing, and that's going to be how we build up to the 2027 agreement. But we can't wait until 27, in my eyes. I don't think we would anyway. I think we'd try and get something in solution in train before. But I think it's become far more time critical now, because there are new technologies available which haven't been available in the past. And they are perhaps sort of game-changing technologies as well. So you talk about Starlink. I mean, it's just low Earth orbit satellites in general. I think the technology, and possibly coming straight to your device in the future. So understanding what's best for the Falklands technology-wise. I mean, ideally, what I'd love to see is us throw everything open to an open market and have loads of people wanting to provide the services. I don't think we're there in terms of people queuing up to provide all of the services. I think certainly there are people wanting to provide the low Earth orbit internet technology, but if we pull that out of everything else, is the rest sustainable? So what I want to make sure is that we in the short term increase the offering to people within the Falkland Islands. And I'm not just talking about shore. I'm talking about how we help people to get better services.
I don't believe that there is room for more than one operator for such a small community, and strategically, while competition may look very attractive to everyone, it may not, and I don't believe it can provide telecommunications in a sustainable way. You know, when you look at how important our increasingly digital lives are, or how important telecommunications are to those digital lives, to everything from healthcare, education, to entertainment, to staying in touch with people, obviously off the island in particular. It's absolutely critical strategically from a longer term perspective that the Falklands has a sustainable and long-term strategic view about the right delivery and the right model for delivery of telecommunications to everyone, to the whole community. And we're working really, really hard to make sure that we provide the best possible service to everyone. And we'll see when it comes to the next licence period and the decision that the Falklands Islands and the community will make about who is the right, or who may be the multiple suppliers. We don't know yet. But I personally believe that one supplier is strategically the best way to go, because it will give the community that long-term assurance and resiliency and sustainable provision that for such a small community in such an isolated location, 2 or 3 suppliers it just wouldn't work. I can't see that happening.
The situation here in the Falklands is a conundrum, one that people far more qualified and experienced than me have been working to resolve. It is a challenge for a large range of services to be provided in such a remote location to such a small number of customers. Frustrations, however, are completely understandable when a game-changing technology comes along, such as Starlink, and can be seen to solve many of the issues that customers have been facing. However, the future usage of Starlink in the islands has been brought into question. The company have recently sent out an email to customers stating that any kit operating in an area other than designated as available will be unable to connect to the internet from April 30th. On the website, the Falklands is listed as an unavailable area. At the time of this airing, to my knowledge, no Starlink units in the islands have been affected as of April 30th, but it does raise questions as to what would happen if they were suddenly shut off. When asked for an official statement, the Attorney General's office issued the following statement. The acting communications regulator in the Falkland Islands has written to Starlink on receiving regulatory approval from the Falkland Islands government for use of their services. No response has been received from Starlink, and it is the intention of the acting communications regulator to write to them again. There is currently an email being circulated to Starlink users to inform them of their terms of service. This email has not come from a direct request from any government department in the Falkland Islands. Rather, Starlink as the business owner have the right to make their customers aware of the terms of service they have signed up to, and they can make their own changes on restricting provision of services if they think their service is being used inappropriately by customers.
It is impossible to predict what will happen between now and the end of the exclusive licence period, and only time will tell whether telecommunications in the Falklands will become an issue of the past.